Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Four Lads Rangers Midweek Podcast. Panathinaikos have been defeated. It was a very good Rangers result last night. Lots of positives. There is some negatives, which we'll try and look at objectively, but we can at least enjoy that result. It was brilliant to be back at Ibrox Stadium. Really nice night, actually. It was quite warm. It was quite humid, and Rangers winning was always a good thing. I'm delighted to be joined by a very good friend of mine, Heart and Hand's very own David Graham. David, thank you for joining us. This has been a long time. We've discussed this, you coming on the show, and obviously you're back on Heart and Hand and going to be a regular there. So this is dipping your toe in and getting you started. But it was great. It's great to have you here. So good afternoon, mate. How did you enjoy it last night and things?
Good to see you. And as Davey Edgar said today, Stevie, is a bit like a pre-season friendly for me before the league starts next week in Heart and Hand. So delighted to be here. Look, I really enjoyed last night. I have to say I didn't enjoy the first half at all, and I think we'll probably get into discussions as to why. I think probably like the team dusted myself down at half time, and it was a much more positive second half. In fact, I think if you had said this time yesterday that we're going to leave with a 2-0 victory, you'd have bitten your hand off for it. So, look, there's plenty to discuss. There's plenty of causes for concern, dare I say, but there's also plenty of causes for positivity and a small sense of, I suppose, celebration that Russell Martin's got his first competitive win at Ibrox.
Yeah, perfectly put, I think, David. On the concerns, there was a few. There's positives as well. So we'll start with some of the key moments. I actually thought Rangers started pretty well in the first 7-8 minutes, and then we got shook. Undoubtedly, Jack Butland made a huge save. It came down our right-hand side. The cross doesn't get stopped. Arguably, the ball might have went out. I think there was a wee bit of Jabati surrounding that. It gets cut back. We don't clear it. And Jack Butland makes a wonderful save with an outstretched arm. And then from there, the rebound, somehow they hit the post. We really got off with one there. And Rangers don't recover. And that kind of concerned me that we didn't regroup quickly enough and we lost our way. And it took us until 35 minutes, which included another great Jack Butland save, to really get going. But to concentrate on the positives first, David, Jack Butland, great to see him back in that kind of form, because Jack is a very capable keeper, but it's also true to say that he's had a really, really difficult year in goals for Rangers, but that was much more like it last night.
Oh, I think Stevie, that was Jack Butland was one of the reasons. His performance last night was one of the reasons why it was such a coup for us to get him this time 2 years ago. I recall being at Rugby Park under Philip Clement. I think it went 1-0 down, come back to win 2 or 3-1. From memory, Jack saved the penalty that night, made a few really, really big saves. Obviously, and look, I kind of can understand why Barry Ferguson maybe did what he did. And I don't think Liam Kelly ever did enough to kind of put his hand up to say, I'm the Rangers number one. I know there's been mentioned a couple of keepers, Pierce Charles, who obviously I watch regularly for Northern Ireland, but certainly last night, if we are to go on a run and if we are to challenge for the league, which we'll maybe discuss later in the show, we need Jack Butland to be making saves that turn defeats into draws and draws into victory. And I think he is very much a game-changing goalkeeper, if that makes sense. And I think he's definitely a leader. And I think one of the challenges, one of the concerns early on last night was, I had a sense, Stevie, where sometimes the players are almost looking around at each other. There was a sense of they didn't quite know what they were doing. And I think it's because you're in a new system, aren't you? And you're being maybe asked to do things that you don't necessarily haven't necessarily done in the past. So I think you definitely need a strong leader like a Jack Butland in the back. So long may that form continue, and hopefully it wasn't a one-off.
Yeah, he did. He made a couple of wonderful saves. There was a second one came when Pana had the corner, and just when you're talking about that wee bit of indecision, Nico Raskin actually is positioned really well. He does really well to block the corner, but at that point, you either put it out for a throw or you take the corner again. He tries to dribble it. It makes its way back, and I think it was a big centre-half, Brown, who got the shot in, and Butland again made himself really big and blocked it, and Rangers cleared. There was some last-ditch defending at times, and we needed that. John Souttar, I thought, and we talked about this a wee bit, and I would put Giga in the same kind of format they're going to have to learn a new style. And I thought at times they were, how do I word this? Because I don't want to be negative, but there was times they were a bit loose on their passes. Giga put Raskin in trouble, which led to his caution. He had to take the foul for that one. John Suter gave the ball away when he was going forward a few times, and it left us. What Pana did really well was expose us when we did come out like that. But when it worked, it actually worked quite well. There's a few clips I want to bring up and show and what we're trying to do. But centre back wise, David, we're probably going to have to play and get used to the players playing with that risk and reward. But there was times last night where it was a wee bit too risky for my liking.
Well, I think that's right. I think strangely, as much as I go to football as regularly as I can at all levels, I don't really enjoy watching. I don't really enjoy watching Rangers. I don't really enjoy watching Linfield either, because the result affects you so much emotionally, I suppose. And I think that had you been a neutral last night, you could have watched that game and enjoyed it, because there were a few times where it was very much like ping pong back and forward. But ultimately for us, I think, like as Rangers supporters, you don't necessarily enjoy the kind of excitement, if you know what I mean. But it's something we need to get used to. And I think actually at half time I was having a text exchange with a couple of boys, Adam and Martin from Heart and Hand. And, Martin sort of said in his own always balanced way, look, get used to this, because you're going to have halves like that. You're going to have moments like that. That's just necessarily how Russell Martin plays. And I suppose always cling to the fact of, at least we know that he has a clear style, where in the past, I mean, I watched virtually every minute of every game under Philippe Clement, and I'm still not actually sure what he was trying to do. So at least we know what he's trying to do, and need to just keep an eye on the blood pressure as the season goes on.
Spot on. Yeah, you're completely right. I want to bring up a wee clip to show, because one of the big things last night was that the fullbacks inverted. Now, I think for the first time we kind of seen that. It's been a staple, I suppose, of pre-season, but we haven't seen a lot of it because it's been behind closed doors. However, last night we've seen it. Now, with that, Max Aarons got caught a few times and he got in trouble. But when it worked really well. There was moments where Tav was able to cut in field and play with Rothwell, and that frees the eights, which they're trying to do. And Raskin was able to get forward. Now, in the first half, Raskin didn't affect the game as much as he did in the second. In the second, Davey, he really went forward on the left-hand side. He became almost like an inside forward, the way that he was playing. If we can get Asgard into that excited me. But you've seen the actual positives and the negatives. One, I don't think Aarons looked entirely comfortable doing that. He'll need to get up to speed with that, and that's natural. And Tav at times as well was the same. But that's obviously going to be a big feature, because they come in to double up in the six, more or less, which allows the eights to go. When it works, it's great. When it doesn't, we've seen what can happen.
Well, I think probably 2 points. I think that obviously Max Aarons clearly has no left foot, whatsoever. You can see he always want to cut back in, which isn't a criticism. He is essentially a right back, from my understanding, but he's an attacking right back. I think there's going to start to be a question mark over, is he there essentially playing out of position better than what we have in Jeff Day? And I think, there's a sense that Yilmaz won't be with us for much longer. It's going to raise a question, I think, over the whole, Tav. Do we play Tav as a regular starter? For me, I always think you try to get your best 11 players in the pitch at a time, it's particularly at the start of the season, when you're not wanting to overly experiment, especially in a kind of new system. So I think it's important to have Tav on the pitch. And I know there'll be a lot of people question Tav's leadership and Tav's this and Tav's that, but there's no doubt about it that we are a better side with Tav in it than not. I think that the issue, and you've identified it, Stevie, is when the inverted fullback works, when it frees up the eights, that's great. And it definitely at times worked. In front of you, I put a clip on social media earlier today to show it working. The issue is that when you lose the ball and you're turned over, you leave yourself really exposed. And I think there was a really good cover and challenge from John Suter last night, maybe even on 2 occasions, where he's definitely almost last-ditch defending. And I think that, it's high risk, isn't it? And I suppose the question will always be, will it be high reward?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certain games where it's going to be really risky, and you would probably look at the Old Firm games as being your one in Scotland.
Exactly.
You would think with Rangers being that high and with that style against the majority, especially at Ibrox, you would be comfortable enough doing that. But it's going to be the high risk games, like you said. Panathinaikos were able to expose that a lot down the sides. We're going to need to, and there'll be a lot, David, as you know, there'll be a lot of tinkering going on and learning as you play and as you go on about how and what style we're going to adapt to and things like that. For example, Jack Butland started off really high in pre-season. I think last night he was normally positioned, and I think they've maybe reined that in, and it'll be tinkering and getting things right. But if we look at that and say that there was a few issues of shape and few things, if we move into the second half, there was an immediate difference. And one of the comments last night by David on kind of on the vlog was at half time, if we had been offered 2-0 at full time, we would have bitten our hands off it. And we probably would have accepted it beforehand as a good result. But at half time, that second half performance and result became absolutely massive and really welcomed.
Yeah, I think one thing, there will be a question mark, or there is a question mark around Jack Butland's distribution. I think that's possibly one of the reasons why Jack Butland has failed with respect to be a Premiership keeper, because there are times where he's definitely made saves and he's shown why he was in the periphery of the England squad, for example. I mean, the kickoff last night that went straight back to Butland. Chelsea, I think, have used that to good effect. Butland's just hoofed it straight into the Govan stand, and there is a bit of sort of hands in your head thinking, flip, like that. It's quite frankly not good enough for a team of our standards and expectations, and that's where probably if you do look at someone like Pierce Charles, you'll see that he would really fit into our system. But I think certainly, and I agree wholeheartedly with Davy Edgar, like if you'd said a 2-0, I mean, I have to say, if it was going to be 2-0 at halftime last night, if you'd said it's going to end 2-0, I would have said it's going to end 2-0 to Panathinaikos, and I think that's almost the strange thing about how we're going to play under Russell Martin, where we've won 2-0, even though, to be honest, we haven't played particularly well, bar a few nice moments. But look, if buts and maybes, but on another night that could have been 2, if not 3-0 to Panathinaikos, bar some of the reasons what we've talked about. So that's why this season will probably be up and down. And to be honest, I think you'll have a lot of ups and downs even within games as well.
Yeah, all fair. But Rangers do go into the second half. Again, Pana have a couple of chances. One comes from a free kick where we play a high line and the boy runs really deep. We're not on shape for that. We do get back. Butland breaks. I think he saves it with his legs, and then Suter does a really good block and we get clear. Then Butland has another save kind of low down. It bounces in front of him. He does well actually to deal with it, but he quickly breaks, which is a new thing for us. There's no keeping it in his hand. He's straight out. Even with goal kicks and throws, we were fast last night. And that then works it down the left. This is the first time this happened. Every time that Finlay Curtis got the ball in the first half, he was back to goal, and he wasn't able to go and affect the game. This is the first time we've seen him take it in his stride and be able to go and commit a defender. He goes past them. You're thinking, what's he going to do? Now, David, I've seen this boy for the 18s and the B team score 50-odd goals, and he does stuff like this. But there's a big difference between youths and the Champions League and doing what he did last night. It was a wonderful finish and a brilliant moment for him.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt. I think, it would be remiss of us not to be positive. I think, he took his goal really well. I mean, I was in the Copeland and you could just see the way he cut in and slaughtered down. It was just a lovely goal. Great to see, one of our own coming into the team and doing really well. And I think that you almost have to caveat that with, we need to be careful as supporters how we sort of help shape a narrative around a young player, because I think we kind of tend to swing a bit like a pendulum, don't you? Where at the start you take Ross McCausland. Ross McCausland's the next big thing, and then he swings then in the other direction. We're probably almost too critical of him because he is, I suppose, one of our own in many ways. And I think really for Finlay Curtis, he needs games, because that's it's the only way he's going to adapt. I think probably hindsight's a wonderful thing. Are we running the team at the end of last season? Probably would have done him the world of good, and I think that was probably a bit of a criticism we had of Barry at the end, was where he seemed to be setting a team up with players who we knew weren't going to be here next year, and they knew they weren't going to be here next year. But look, that's ultimately all in the past now. And I think certainly there were times, and I think Russell Martin said it in his press conference his interview with Emma Dodds, where he said, yeah, that, you know, he looked like an 18-year-old boy supporter, very nervous, playing his first game at Ibrox or first Champions League game at Ibrox, etc. So he'll need managed, he'll need to be allowed to progress at a certain pace. But you know, there's no doubt there's a player in there. But one thing I'd say is there's no doubt he's going to take a little longer to learn and adapt to what Russell Martin wants him to do and how he wants him to play.
Yeah, all totally fair. But what I liked about the goal is it was the first time that he was able to get in a shape where he was taking it in his stride and he commits the defender straight away to go and do that. 5 minutes later, another real game-defining moment. He does it again, and this time the fullback's all over him. Really clever by Finlay Curtis, because he doesn't try and run off the contact. As soon as he feels it and it's enough, he's down, which is, you know, absolutely, if he tries to go on, he maybe doesn't get that position and stuff like that. But in doing that, those two moments, those two touches, the way he dribble past was absolutely fantastic. He was named Stadium Man of Match, ironically, by our sponsors, Afro Industrial Solution. And you could argue for key moments, but it was nice, actually, that we could talk about it at the end, and we will. You had Butland, the Rothwells, etc., that come on. But two huge moments for Finlay Curtis. And he didn't have the best first half. He was jittery. I think that's fair. He was a bit nervous on the ball. But those two moments are why he's in the team. And we can argue why Cortez not playing and things like that. But Finlay is a youngster. He's got a great attitude. Russell Martin spoke about it. And those two moments arguably were as big as any in the tie overall last night for winning us the game.
There's no doubt, and I think we'll get to Gassama in due course, but there's no doubt that, you know, we're probably of a generation, Stevie, where you love an old school winger to get you up off your seat. And I think that he definitely looks an inventive player, Finlay Curtis. I suppose he plays with the handbrake off, doesn't he? And I think that probably is where you need to manage expectations, because probably a little bit like a Ryan Kent, where, you know, when he jigs past someone and does a trick and it's all great, you know, you're applauding, but, you know, that doesn't happen every time. And he might try that 3, 4, 5, 6 times and it fails. But I think ultimately, you know, if Finlay Curtis wants to establish himself in the Rangers team, he's going to have to allow himself to make mistakes. He's shown a good attitude. I thought he worked back really well last night. And I think that, you know, there's definitely, without getting carried away, you know, there's definitely a player for the future there.
Yeah, I would agree with you. He actually had two vital challenges in the first 10 minutes. There was one where he got back just as the boy was about to shoot and he blocked it really well, and another that he got back as well. So
he looked almost like he'd hurt himself, Stevie, in that one, because it was right down in front of me. So he showed a bit of bravery to chuck himself in there, you know.
Yeah, and it's always one of those ones where you have to get it right, don't you? Because if you don't, then you're right on the edge of it being given the wrong way. Just a big shout out and thanks to Bluebells, who's gifted 5 memberships. We really appreciate that. Grab one, folks, while you can, just as we're nattering away about last night. Then it becomes exciting, David, because we've got 10 men. They take off Ioannidis. They almost settle in a shape. It's all Rangers. Rangers are really high. Raskin has 2 efforts, which he saves, but then's a key moment, and this is exciting for me. It's the first time we've seen him. Jerry Gassama comes on, and what I liked about him straight away, and Davey said this last night, and he was spot on, a winger that doesn't change his style or doesn't change his system. He says, this is who I am. I'm going to be a player that's exciting. I'm going to be fast. I'm going to use trickery. I'm going to run, and I'm going to try and shoot and things like that. And he did it. And very shortly after he comes on, he would score that wonderful goal. But on first glimpses, this is going to be a boy. He'll probably frustrate us at times, as most wingers do. But we have not seen an exciting player like this in a long time. And we need to be grounded. It's his first showing and things like that, yes. But that was a wonderful little cameo for me. And you go back to the kind of Kent days of that old style winger. Because I think Czerny was different. Czerny was more a forward. He wasn't as tricky. He wasn't as kind of skillful, maybe. But this is like an old-fashioned, skillful little winger who, well, he's a giant to me. But in terms of, you know, just excitement and raw pace and that, just sheer excitement, honestly. I fell in love with him instantly. and thought this boy's going to be great to watch.
Yeah, look, you can't judge very much off social media, if we're honest. But I think that if you see the reaction of Sheffield Wednesday fans when they had a sense Gassama was leaving, then when he did leave, and even last night, I mean, there's a couple of guys I saw on my feed basically saying that, like, you know, pretty much we had won a watch and we had gone for a steal. And I think obviously with Sheffield Wednesday's sort of current financial situations, we probably have. And I think you could probably argue not basing everything on essentially 15 minutes of a really good performance, that, you know, we probably have probably done really well to get him. In fact, we have done really well to get him. I think that's going to have to be credit to our new recruitment team who've been able to work in the background to make that happen. So there's no doubt about it. He is the sort of player that we will need, you know, probably a bit like Igaman last year at Parkhead, someone who is prepared to just, you know, grab the game by the balls, pardon the pun, and get us up the pitch, show no fear, and there'll be hopefully more game changing moments. And I think at 1-0, if we don't go on to score at least one more, in fact, actually, let me say there was almost a sense of disappointment with me where I think we really could have killed the game off at 3. But, you know, this is not going to be easy in Greece next week. It's going to be far, far from easy. But going for 2-0 advantage is much better than 1-0, because I think if we're sitting here now at 1-0, would be sort of pleasantly, you know, would be at peace with a decent result after not a great performance. But 2 at least gives us a little bit of breathing space, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. If it was 1-0, we'd be sitting there saying it's okay, you know, first, but we're saying it's good. So there's a big difference in what happened. But getting that second was vital. What I liked about it was that he just took it on and really went to commit defenders cutting across. I didn't expect him to shoot as well as he did. He almost fainted and went in the other side, because everything would tell you that you would try and go the same way that Finlay Curtis does, but he doesn't. He closes his foot, as Neil McCann described it, and just thrashes it in the corner. As I said, really excited to see him. 2.5 million. I'm with you, the Sheffield Wednesday fans, talking about him being an £8-10 million player and will be excellent on in the future. So to see that last night, I must admit, David, look, I'm a supporter, you're a supporter. I want to be excited. I want to fall in love with guys. I want to have heroes. I want to be excited. And first glimpse of him, yes, maybe I'm getting overexcited. It has been labelled at me before. But I really liked it. Honestly, I really liked him. I liked his style. He done a couple of more tricks on the left. He got down the left-hand side. He put in a wonderful cross for Igaman's header that was just wide. But on that point you made, 80 minutes, we had 15 left, including the injury time that went on. I would have liked to have seen us went for the jugular a wee bit. But there was a sense of, I think maybe they settled slightly and thought this is a good result. But I'm with you. There's a long way to go in this tie. We're not getting carried away. Panathinaikos showed they're a threat. But a half-time 2-0 lead, I'm quite comfortable and happy with that.
Yeah, look, I think, you know, and I almost think it's a little bit on us as supporters as well, where if you go back a step, I mean, I was having a conversation with a couple of the guys Sunday, Monday, saying, look, all I get is this sense of sort of dread of, you know, this is going to be a really tough game and we're really going to struggle, etc., etc. And as we talked that out, I said, what's that actually based on? And, you know, it was actually Adam and Martin again. And Adam says, well, it's actually based on absolutely nothing, bar the fact we've lost Tierney. We've signed a few what looks like decent players. We've signed a few players with sort of question marks over it. So essentially, it's really just based on historically or kind of almost sort of scar tissue of years of kind of the hope outweighing expectation, and then ultimately the lack of fulfillment at the end. So I think, you know, when the 6 minutes went up last night, there was a groan, and I sort of sense it was a groan because people were like, well, you know, just blow the whistle because we've done really well to get 2-0. But in the same sentence, part of me always felt, you know what, 6 minutes was a good opportunity to try to have one more lash at things and try to get a third to put the tie virtually to bed. So, look, confidence both within the players and the staff and the club in general, particularly supporters, will only come with a good run of results. But certainly I do agree, if you wanted to be balanced, you know, we were probably in danger of being too negative before. So there's probably almost a danger of being too positive after. So I think that probably, as you say, 2-0 actually was on the whole a very good result, but it could have been better.
Yeah, there was a definite excitement around me leaving the gantry last night, having won 2-0. The excitement of being back, the excitement of getting a good result, but then you have to try and temper it somewhat, because everything we're talking about and trying to be objective, looking at the first half, looking at how the game panned out, I think that's totally fair. One thing I did want to go as we kind of wrap up the conversation around last night was some of the individual performances. I thought Joe Rothwell looked like a player that will become a very good player for us. He grew into it. I think that's fair. But the way he used the ball, his distribution at times was very, very good. He had one in particular, he was getting closed down by two and back heeled it out to a boy, which I thought was really, really smart. He looks like a player that obviously the idea is to use the inverted wing backs to free him so that he can feed the eights. And he done it really well. He was quite sharp on the ball. His delivery was good, although we didn't have a lot of corners and things in the first half especially. He's a player, David, that I instantly like the look of. We will need to be patient again and give him a run of games and see where he is. But I think he'll be a smart signing for Rangers. He's very experienced, lots of leadership, very calm on the ball. I think we've missed somebody as mobile as him in that position for a while. And I'm really looking forward to the team growing around him and him growing in it.
Oh, look, I think, Stevie, when you look at our successful periods, and even, when we've had really good results over the last, really probably since Steven Gerrard come in, so what, the last 7 years-ish, we've always had one or two players in the middle of the park who could control, could break things up, who could control the game, who had the ability to pick a pass, who had the ability to get us up the pitch. I'm certainly not saying that Joe Rothwell is in the of the same standard of Stephen Davis, but we've never replaced Stephen Davis since he's left, because we've never had someone that's been able to control the game. Rothwell looked like he'd do it last night, albeit he probably looks a bit more abrasive, where there's almost a sense of probably a bit of kind of Ryan Jack there as well, So I think that there's definitely a player there. I know, speaking, Stuart Dallas was at the game with me last night, and he's played against him, and he said, look, he's definitely, he'll make the game tick, he'll control the game. So, which he did, I felt. And I think certainly, we always have like an eye on the next Old Firm, don't we? And there's no doubt he looks like the sort of player that won't allow, the likes of Colin McGregor to prance around like he's in a Zinedine Zidane. So, again, there's plenty of positivity around him, and hopefully he's able to get us up to speed. One thing I would say, Stevie, just on the subject of individual players, 3 managers have now come in and started Kieran Doyle, so he has to be doing something right somewhere. General feedback that I hear is, he's a really good lad. He's good to have around the place. Birmingham fans were really positive about him last year, but I'm just not quite sure what he does for us. And even my son was with me last night, said at one point, I didn't realise he was in the pitch, which I thought was, as young kids can be, quite harsh without meaning it. But I'm just not sure where he fits in. And I think if there is any sort of decent offer that comes in for him, I think it's probably best to shake hands and wish him all the best.
It's interesting that you mentioned Kieran Dowell, because he was the next topic of conversation for me, just when we're talking about a few comments that have came in talking about Kieran Dowell. It's obvious at Rangers we like to have a whipping boy. It's always the same, somebody that we can. I try not to, but I'm with you. It's difficult to see. He's a very safe player. So he plays within his system. He plays nice and tidy, gets the ball. He will lay it off. He'll do a power of work. He done some good clearances at back post, and he was there and stuff like that. But you're not going to get Kieran Dowell taking somebody on the right wing. He's not going to commit players. He's not going to dribble. He's not going to add that goal threat. Now, the problem with that is when we play expansively the way that we do, our wingers have to be exciting. They have to be pacey. They have to go and attack, because it helps the way we set up. If it's square pegs round holes kind of thing, which I think Kieran Dowell is out there, then he'll be tidy, he'll be okay, but he's never going to be anything other than okay. That's not a criticism. I'm with you. I don't see what he brings to the team in that situation. Ideally, if you can get Gassama on the left and bring in somebody on the right, I think Rangers will look really positive. I don't think it helps the striker if you've got that kind of wide player either in that system. So I'm with you, David. I don't want to be too critical and we go on as if we're slating, but I think it's fair to say that for a lot of people looking at Kieran Dowell last night, they will question exactly what he's bringing to the team.
Yeah, I think it's, there's no doubt he's a good, he's a good footballer, and there's no doubt that he's good, he's got sound credentials, and I can see why we brought him in. But I think he is probably fallen into that trap, like a lot of players. Probably a bit like Ross McCrory, if you remember, albeit Ross was a much more defensively minded player, where he didn't actually know where his strongest position was. Like Ross played centre half, right back, midfield. And I think probably with someone like Kieran Dowell, because he doesn't seem his ability to sort of put his hand up to say, I am a 6, I am an 8, whatever the case may be, I am a wide player, then he's always going to leave himself exposed to being, as you said, the whipping boy. And that's why, in many ways, feedback was really good on him at Birmingham last season. And actually, if he goes back to Birmingham or another club, wherever, then there'll actually be, he'll probably get more positive feedback. But in a way, he's playing at Rangers, and you don't play, if I had a pound for every current or former Rangers player, it says like you will never play anywhere like this for the rest of your career. Kieran Dowell probably just sums up the kind of the negative effect of that statement, doesn't he?
He does. I had to laugh at this. I know exactly who this is, and you'll know it as well. Dowell almost as boring as Mr. Graham's history lessons. That's our old friend over there in Northern Ireland giving you a bit of stick. David, the comments have been really good about you today. A lot of people pleased to see you on, so that's a nice thing. A lot of people saying you must play rugby with those shoulders as well, mate. So
yeah,
everybody's enjoying you being back in.
You see the state of my back. I'll not be playing rugby anytime soon.
Well, I've never, far too violent a sport for me, David, as you well know. But just as we come to finish up, just as we look at last night overall, David, the manager commented, pleased with Curtis and Gassama. One of the key things he reiterated, now, this is not the first time Russell Martin said this, and it's more or less telling everybody, this squad will not be the same. It will be vastly different at the end of the transfer window. There's still things happening. There's still a lot going on. There'll be a lot of players go out the door. I think that's fair. And there'll be, most likely, I think, you could speculate 2 to 3, 3 to 4, whatever you want to say, still coming into the club. So on the manager's comments last night, what does that tell you when he's saying that? Do you expect what I've said, like a high volume of certainly players out, because the squad's far too big, so the players out should outnumber the ones that come in? I think that's a fair guesstimation, if you like. But incomings, you would still hope for a few more.
Look, I think there's no doubt. I think, to sort of try to sum it up in under a minute, I think, Danilo, for me, again, I'm not quite sure what he's going to offer moving forward. Maybe he needs to get himself fit, and if we can keep him fit, there's something there. I think if a decent offer comes in for Dessers, again, shake hands and move on. I would be very keen to bring in an out-and-out striker. I think that if we're going to make any sort of attempt to win this league over 38 games, we need someone that's going to score 20 to 25 goals before you're asking the like of a Gassama to come in with 10 or 15 and other players like it. So striker for me, definitely. I think, the centre half situation, there are a few that we need to get out the door. I think Nasala's one in particular. And I think that, again, we need to have another ball playing centre half, unless, dare I say, and the comments explode, Russell Martin's an idea for potentially putting Tav at centre half at times, which in fairness to him, I actually thought he performed quite well there. And it may help if he has lost a yard of pace, which I think, in fairness, there's no doubt about. But certainly, off the top of my head, there's half a dozen I would be glad to see moved on for a wide range of reasons. I don't think we need to bring half a dozen back in. I think at this stage, we need to be bringing in players who can start, can clearly put their hand up as starters, not just necessarily in St Mirren away or Motherwell at home, but players who you would have no fear throwing into a Champions League playoff, for example, if we were fortunate to get that far, or the likes of the Old Firm. And I think even, dare I say, Stevie, I'm at peace with bringing in another couple of loans if they are able to come in and make a real difference to us. Ryan Kent came alone, but as did that season from memory, Shea Ojo, Ovi Ajaria, and potentially one more, Andy King possibly. So, one worked out in the long term, the other three didn't for various reasons. So we can't be someone else's sort of, academy. But I think at this stage we definitely need to be thinking smart in the transfer window, because it's a long season, particularly if we get into group stages again and we want to make a stab at every domestic competition too.
Yeah, the loan situation, David, doesn't bother me, to be quite honest. If you were to bring in somebody of the quality of Raksaki, for example, from down south, from Palace, he was at Palace, isn't it, Bournemouth? I'm not quite sure. He was on loan at Sheffield United. You've seen his quality. If you can suddenly have Gassama on one side and him on the other, which then means that you can go and build for those positions for the future, then you've got the option. I think you can take 5 on loan, isn't it? So there's plenty of room there. We've got a couple in at the moment. And with you, I think we need another centre half with Fernandes. That then backs that up. I would like to see a winger come in on the right-hand side. And then your forward position. Yeah, the big issue is that Cyril, that's still ongoing. Eagleman, there's plenty. By the way, I thought Eagleman, his touch, his passing last night, his moment in the second goal from Max Aarons down the side, and he plays that ball straight in, I thought was very, very good. He's obviously a player of quality. Would I like to see Eagleman as your number 9 and get a run at that? I actually quite would. So that's interesting. So I think there's plenty of room to do business, but striker, winger, centre back, if you got that, I would be overjoyed. In terms of players going out, we've spoke about it a lot, I think, on this show. And with you could lose 8 to 10 when you think about Ben Davis, Inciala, Leon King needs to go and play. You've got Cifuentes, you've got Rabbi Matondo, you've got Redvan. That's just off the top of the old head as well. That without looking at the squad, you could argue Ross McCausland needs to go and play. Yeah, if he's close to Aris, you would consider that. Then you start thinking about Cyril and stuff like that. You've got the Turgeman deal, which is rumoured to be sitting, waiting on players going out to come in. We don't know how true that is. We're just waiting to see. But I think, when you consider Russell Martin's comments, there's still plenty of legs for Rangers to do that. And I'm with you with regards to the starters. What we do in the next few weeks could be defining in the point of, you could argue at the moment they've done some really sensible business. Gassama's exciting, Rothwell's good for the team. But finally, David, I'm with you just on that point. If you can make a couple of, they're not going to spend 10 million on a player. I think we all know that. But if you can make a couple of really good first team signings and get them in, that could be key for us, especially in the wing, especially up front. And we'll see what happens in the centre back position.
Yeah, look, I think, Stevie, to sum it up, we need to be very careful where we talk a lot about, project players and one for the future and various things. Well, I can't remember the opposition, but, Clinton Asala was hauled off. Was it Dundee? Barry hauled him off because he had an absolute nightmare in front of our very eyes. And I think anyone who plays with the first team, trains with the first team, it doesn't matter if it's Stenhousemuir away in the Cup or, it's AC Milan at home in the Champions League. We need to have players that we have confidence to put in the starting position, because, Finlay Curtis proved himself last night worthy of being in and around the first team and very capable. But, I think someone against Ciala sums it up. We have ran risks in the past that have worked out for us, the likes of a Calvin Bassey being one, who, if you recall, really struggled away to St Mirren when we lost in the League Cup, and then we sold him for a club record. So, we have to obviously, manage that risk. But what I do think is that, anyone that is in this squad this year, if we're really serious about challenging for the league, if we're really serious about going into the business end of domestic cups, we need to have a squad that we can wholly rely on. And I think really one of the challenges that we've had over the last probably 2 seasons is there have been just too many question marks over players who, even with given time, they haven't been able to prove themselves. And Cifuentes is one that you've said there. Probably even Doyle falls into it. Possibly Ben Davies as well, and the Salah. There are a long list of players. Dare I say, even put someone like Cyril Dessers in, whose stats are obviously very good at times. But how much better would it be if he had taken another sort of 15, 20 of those chances? So look, ultimately, we can't expect to. We're old enough, Stevie, to remember the days in the 90s. We can't expect to be signing the equivalent of a Laudrup and a Gaza and various others, but we do have to be realistic about anyone that bring in. They have to be an improvement on what we have got already. And I think too many times you can change for change's sake, and you can almost say, the key is in any window, in my view, you're better off at the end of it than you were at the start of it. And I think for too many windows of late at Rangers, there have been more questions than answers around who we've brought in, who we've let go.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect summary. Not much more needs to be said. Let's end it there, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a fabulous discussion. It's brilliant to do it on the back of such a good result. And yes, there is positives, there is negatives that we've kind of looked at objectively. But we go into the friendly game with Middlesbrough on Saturday with we can see some different players. I think you might see the likes of Leo Cameron and things getting some game time, so that'll be interesting. And then we go to Greece next Wednesday night, which is a huge match. It is only half time in the tie. This is not done by any stretch of the imagination, especially when you've seen how dangerous Panathinaikos can be. Rangers will need to make sure that they don't give up that volume of chances, that's for sure. But it's been a delight to be joined by my very good friend David Graham this afternoon. David is back on Heart and Hand more regular. You will hear him on the Monday night flagships with David and co over there. So David, thank you for coming on as your pre-season friendly, as you put it. But great to see you again. And by the way, I might poach you later in the season to get you back on as well. But enjoy your time on Heart and Hand, and it's great. It'll be great to hear you back on there too.
Absolutely. Cheers, Stevie. Cheers, folks. Have a good day.
Okay, folks. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this afternoon pod. Again, thousands of you watching and subscribing to the channel, and that which we love. If you haven't subscribed on YouTube, please like and subscribe. That really helps us grow, and really appreciate all your support. Bluebells for gifting the memberships as well. So thank you. Big thanks to our sponsors, Rhino Express, Clydeville Joinery, Affle Industrial Solutions, CSD Air Conditioning, and our partners, Black Rooster and Art of Gold. We've had a great time talking to you today. On behalf of David and I, have a great night. We'll speak to you again on Friday on the live show. Take care, everyone. Well done to Rangers and Russell Martin last night. A fantastic result. On to the next one.
The Four Lads podcast is sponsored by Rhino Express, Clydeview Joinery, Affle Industrial Solutions Limited, and CSD Air Conditioning, in partnership with Black Rooster and Art of Gold. Thank you for listening to or watching the podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show.